Got it.
Great.
And good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this Neem Press panel with our fabulous authors. So I'm just going to introduce them both, all of them, four of them very briefly, and then it's actually over to them. The panel is really not about the publishing process per se, but we will touch a little bit on it. But it's really about them and their creativity and what got them to the place that we are in right now. So first I'll start with Shahd. Shahd AlShammari teaches literature and holds a PhD in English from the University of Kent, Canterbury. She served as a judge for literary prizes in the past. Her works include Literary Madness in British Postcolonial and Bedouin Women's Writing, Notes on the Flesh, and published by Neem Press, Head Above Water, Reflections on Illness. Her research areas include disability studies and women's studies. Hafsa Lodi is a journalist who has been covering fashion and culture for more than a decade. She has a BA in journalism from Ryerson University in Toronto and a master's in Islamic law from SOAS in London. Her debut non-fiction book, published by Neem Press, Modesty, a Fashion Paradox, launched in 2020 right into COVID, which was very frustrating, and explores the causes, controversies, and key players of the global modest fashion movement from cultural, religious, political, and feminist lenses. Faiqa. Where is Faiqa? Faiqa, yes. Your name says something different though, it's a bit disconcerting. So Faiqa is a fabulous writer. Her debut novel, The House of Clay and Water, was published by Penguin India in 2017. It's been translated into Turkish and very excitingly, it's been optioned for screen adaptation. Faiqa's second novel is coming out in 2024 with us, with Neem Press and Penguin India simultaneously. It's called The Storyteller, and it is wonderful. She has written for the Lucy Writers Platform, Medusa Creatives, Tribune India, and others. She has an MFA in fiction with a distinction from Kingston University in London. And last but not least, we have Safinah Danish Elahi, who's a lawyer, a novelist, and a poet. She's authored 2 books, a collection of poetry, The Unbridled Romance of Love and Pain, and a novel, Eye on the Prize. Her next book will be published by us, The Idle Stance of the Tipler Pigeon, as well as in Pakistan, simultaneously in July 2023. She's also actually herself the founder of a publishing house called Reverie Publishers, which is hoping to guide Pakistan's Anglophone emerging writers. It's very exciting. And she was the official nomination from Pakistan for the International Writers Fall Residency in 2022 at the University of Iowa. And she, I think by all sort of information, had a great time and learned a lot from the Iowa Writers Program. So, so welcome all. Thank you very much for being here. I'm just really excited to have this discussion. So I think we will start with Faiqa. I'm going to ask you all very much similar questions, really, and we're really trying to get to what makes you tick as writers. So Faiqa, when did you first start thinking of yourself as a writer, and what drove you to write?
Thank you, Archna. It's lovely to be here. I mean, I know this will sound like a cliche, but this is actually true in my case, that I remember the moment I was 11 years old, and I suddenly had this realization that this joy that I'm getting from books, from reading, I can do this too one day. I can give the same joy. And that's when I decided that I want to be a writer. And not that I changed anything then, because I just thought, you know, at that age, obviously, you don't realize that this is your learning, this is your apprenticeship, this reading that you're doing. So what I did was that I would just, you know, I loved writing already. I would, you know, when we were in school, there was this period of essay writing. And that was my favorite lesson, you know, in school. So I loved writing, and I just, I wrote a lot before I got published. So there were many, many unfinished manuscripts. There were many short length manuscripts. But I never really thought that I was at that point where I could send them out. So I think I had the editor's eye quite young. So I waited till I had something that I thought was good enough, and then I sent it out.
So how old were you when you first sort of started officially writing, would you say?
Officially writing, I was in my late 30s.
Okay.
Yeah.
Shahd, what about you? What prompted
I think it's kind of very similar to Faiqa's answer. It started with actually being very, very conflicted about having another sibling. And so I couldn't deal with conflict. And I think there was a sense of, loss and jealousy at 11 years old. And so I wrote a book about, this new sister that I was going to have and what that would entail. And then I passed it out to a lot of students with me in school. And that's how it first started, that I realized, you could kind of work through conflict by writing about real life stories. And that kind of carried throughout my, whole career. I work with mainly narrative nonfiction, and I draw on experiences that are, difficult to process. And yeah, I've officially, I would say, started really working on this post PhD. I realized that I wanted to write for the general public rather than just for a select group for academics or teachers. I wanted people to kind of see that we could openly write about conflict and these vulnerabilities and not have to resolve them or not have to solve the conflict.
And that's great. Safinah.
I think my journey was somewhat accidental. A professor of mine told me years ago, I think, that, he said that, have you ever considered writing? And I was always a reader, but I didn't think I could write. My novel, The Idle Stance of the Tippler Pigeon, I wrote while I was interning at a law firm. I think I got really bored because they weren't giving me enough work. And I wrote the first draft there. And I on the Prize was sitting in my daughter's sports day. And I was just looking at the parents and, I realized that there were more losers than winners. And I'm like, nobody's talking about this, the kind of pressure that parents are putting on their children. So I would say it's been accidental. Nobody in my community, nobody in my friend circle knew how to be a writer. I didn't know the process of submitting a manuscript or publishing even. But yes, I mean, it's been an exciting and passionate journey so far. But I'd say I stumbled upon it.
Interesting. Hafsa.
Well, I guess my journey is a bit different, and my writing journey has gone through some major evolutions. I'm first and foremost a journalist. And how did I get into journalism? I was bored one summer in Dubai. All my friends had gone back to their home countries for the summer, and I interned at Masala magazine, which is a very South Asian tabloidy publication here. I was writing horoscopes and doing a roundup of the most eligible bachelors in town. That's how I started. Decided I wanted to study journalism, and then once I was actually studying journalism, realized there was this big honor killings case that happened in Canada's Muslim community, and everyone was painting it as a Muslim issue, an Afghan issue. And I thought, no, this isn't a Muslim thing. Let's get the record straight, and kind of started, I wrote a story about that. So then my work started veering towards kind of like rectifying these, I don't want to say Islamophobic, but ignorant stereotypes in the West about a community that I identify with. And then my writing is kind of straight along that path since then.
Right. So I guess, Shahd, let's start with you. So specifically about Head Above Water, what was the impetus for that particular book, and how did you construct the structure for that? Because it's a quite unique structure.
So Head Above Water actually is partly an illness narrative, and it also includes diary entries. It includes a lot of work that I had done through blogging. So I had kept a blog for about 10 years, quite a long time, and I had engaged with a lot of people through blogging. And I also had these diary entries that I had kept. I was living with multiple sclerosis, MS, at the age of 18. And so I kept all of these diary entries to kind of help me stay rooted within the body, but also so that I don't end up forgetting, pretty much everything about who I am, what I want to do in my life, and so on. Because with MS, there are lots of memory difficulties that arise too. So Head Above Water was really a mix of all of these different forms of life writing. and trying also to kind of capture this idea that memory can be very, very vague, and it can fail you, whether you're living with an illness or just by age, or the way that memory can have its own kind of mastery over us. So Head Above Water ended up being all of these different memories intertwined with conversations, with reflections, hence the title, Reflections on Illness. And I drew a lot from these diary entries. So I actually went back to look at these diary entries, random years. It was a process of about 12 to 13 years, and I just kind of went through the most sort of impactful moments of my life, of my career, of my diagnosis, and I just tried to put that all into a form of a conversation, because these conversations are meant to be very inviting to the reader also. So Head Above Water is classified as a memoir, it's classified as an illness narrative, as an autoethnography, as a conversation, and everybody who reads it ends up having a different reaction to how do we actually classify it. And I think a big part of the book's mission is to kind of avoid this classification and focus more on the emotion behind the narrative, which is this really shared vulnerability of life and of navigating the body and illness through different mediums, more than anything. So,
thank you, Safinah. I'm generally curious. So, The Idle Stars of Tipler Pigeon. What was the impetus for writing that particular book? And are there any characters in that book that you particularly identify with? Safinah? Has she? I think she might have frozen.
Yeah.
Okay. Faiqa, let's switch to you. Well, you've got two books, obviously. You've got your first book and then the book with us. And we don't want to give the game away too much for the storyteller. So, but maybe with your first book then, what was the impetus for that? But perhaps you can just tell us a little bit about the book. And then what was the impetus for those characters? What made you write that particular book?
So, I always have this thing when I start a novel, I have to wait to find which is the right way to tell that story. So I know the characters, I know what the story is, but it can go, 100 different ways. So that starting point determines how the story will go. I mean, there are some parts which are, convergent, but others are not. So that starting point is very important. So I had been writing about my main character, which is Nida. And it's in part of it is first person and part is in the third person point of view. So with Nida, it was a very clear voice. I knew her very well because I'd sort of been thinking about this book for years before I started writing. I started writing it, I think, a couple of years before I started my MFA in Kingston. So I had already been writing the novel. I had about 50,000 words when I went to Kingston, but I rehashed a lot of that during my MFA. I rewrote a lot. But interestingly, the other two main characters were born during the MFA. So it was only Nida that I already had in my mind, very clear, very, absolutely all there. But with Bhangi, who is the intersex person in the story, they came quite late, I think in the second half of the first year while I was there, because I already had that sort of the function of that character there, but the character was not clear. So, I mean, it's very interesting how novels sort of happen. It's all very organic. It's, they sort of develop suddenly and sometimes very slowly. So that's how it was for me.
Okay. Safinah, I don't know whether you heard my question. So talking specifically about Tipler, and obviously you don't want to give the game away too much since the book isn't published yet. But just wondered, what was the impetus for that particular book, and what was the impetus for those characters? And was there a character that you particularly sort of associated yourself with?
Archna, I think when I wrote that novel, it's based on my childhood home, and I always knew I wanted to situate some characters there. But there's no one character that I identify with, but there are a lot of questions that I think growing up I had because of how our culture revolves around help being in the house. And you see, elements of classism and elements of even harassment in the narrative. I wanted to bring all of that together in a way that I had read books that I liked. So Khalid Hosseini does a lot of sort of, grief and trauma in childhood, makes a person's personality. So I wanted to incorporate all of that. So I knew that I wanted flashbacks in my story. I wanted this, sibling duo. I wanted their relationship. I wanted a relationship with the help's daughter. So that I kind of situated there because I said, that there are these two children who are privileged, and then there's another child. So children don't know the difference between privilege, being raised with money and not being raised with money, right? So I revolved a story around that, and I wanted the reader to feel the differences in how they're treated, and how the children treat the child and how the adults treat the child. So I think a story around that was kind of, in my periphery, and I just didn't know how to put it. And with Tipler, it just kind of all, merged together.
Blended together. Great, thank you. Hafsa, so I guess you can talk about the book that you're working on now and what inspired you. We don't have a title yet, so you can't say the title.
Okay, great.
But you can talk. Talk about the name of the main character. That's fine. So
okay. So her. Oh wow, really wasn't prepared to talk about this. Okay, so her name is Dunya, and it's kind of a play on words because she's kind of grappling with all of the issues within this dunya while also trying to hold on to some sort of spiritual relationship with God, but she's really kind of consumed in relationships and social life and materialism, and she wasn't always that way, but she kind of becomes that way with age and circumstance and depending on where she is in life. And yeah, I would say I see myself in parts of her. I see my friends in parts of her. I see my family members in parts of her. She's kind of an extreme version of all of us meshed together. Yeah, without giving
so what made you? I mean, what compelled you to write this? Because you've done the nonfiction. So what made you do the turn?
Oh, how deep can I get into this? So I was pregnant when I wanted to write a story about a pregnant woman. And I was pregnant when writing it. And I don't know, you go through all of these highs and lows when you're pregnant, and your hormones are everywhere and your emotions are everywhere. And yeah, I don't want to give too much away, but that's basically what inspired it. A pregnant woman, and as she kind of reflects back onto her life, she's about to become a mother, and did she even want to be a mother? And life is going to change irreversibly after she becomes a mother, and that was kind of the inspiration.
That's great. So all of you have touched a little bit about process, and Faiqa, I really resonated with you saying, I wrote and rewrote so many before, I submitted and all that. So I think there might be some young people who are thinking of being writers who may be listening to this either now or later on. So I want to just touch on the process of writing and how intense it is and how many times you have to rewrite. Do you guys write on paper? Do you write on, do you type straight away? So Faiqa, maybe I can start off with you again on this. How long does it take you from the germ of an idea to actually putting something on paper, and physically, how do you do it? Where do you do it? How do you juggle everything else that you're doing while you're writing?
So it's not the same for every novel. It will change. I mean, with my first novel, because the voice was so clear in my head, I was, sort of putting things down, and I would write everywhere. I have notebooks in my bag. I have notebooks in my room. So I just make my headings and my note 1, note 2, like that, and I just write that. I don't transfer to the laptop till I actually feel I have enough material, enough notes, and enough sort of information about the characters, about the plot, to actually begin the story. So, there was no sort of research involved, because I feel that whatever I'm reading, whatever I'm watching, whatever is happening, that's all sort of research for me.
Mm-hmm.
So there are very few things that I actually need research for. And for that, my go-to thing is go to the library, read. So the process, I think, just, excuse me, it changes with the story, with the novel that you have. Sometimes you do need more gestation in your head for that story. But I think on the average, it takes me a year to write the first draft, because I take my time with the characters. I want to be ready before I, begin the story. Because once you've chosen the path, like I was telling earlier, there's a path to the story. Once you've chosen your path, then you have to stick to it. You can't change, midway. So I take my time in choosing my path, and then I make it the best story that I can, So the first draft takes a year, but then I take a lot of time with editing, because I love editing. I love the process of, throwing things out and adding details, refining the thing as much as possible.
Right, that's fantastic. Safinah, how about is it more structured, or do you just start writing?
No, so I'm a pantser. I'm not a plotter. I immediately, whatever, if something speaks to me, if an idea comes to me, I start writing. So funnily, when I was going to Iowa, I was working on something after Tippler. And I wrote about, 10,000 words. I introduced the characters. I wrote down character sketches. And when I opened, my laptop there, I just thought it was absolute rubbish. And I chucked it away. And I was like, I'm in Iowa. I have so much time. I want to write about something. And then a new story sort of came about, and I've, just finished writing the first draft of it. And I think my first drafts are very quick and very messy. I just take everything out. I experiment with voice, with narrative, with tone, and I just kind of throw it out, on my laptop. And then I start to think if it makes sense or not. So I'm currently just finishing up my MFA in publishing and fiction, and I'm workshopping that, and I'm going to be submitting that as my thesis as well. And there's lots of opinions and lots of critiques that come my way, and you kind of then, like Faiqa said, refine your work. And my first drafts are also super small, like super short. And I add on, things that the character needs, scenes that need to happen before I jump. And I also take my story always in parts, and I can always remove the parts later. But I do it in chunks. So part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4. And my first drafts usually take about 2 to 3 months. But I mean, then you end up working on it for 3 years. So.
Right. Yeah. So we have two very different methods actually already. Hafsa, how have you gone about?
So funny, I have two opposites with Safinah and Faiqa. Faiqa, I hate editing. I'm in the editing stage right now, and I hate editing. And Safinah, you start short, I start big. Like I think I'm at 102,000 words right now on what I'm working on. It's like still building. But yeah, I start everywhere. So I start with a notebook. I love handwriting. I still have a traditional planner agenda. Like I don't have Google Calendar for things like this, but I write everything by hand. So I start with my notebooks. Sometimes it builds into like one notebook per character. And then, you're sleeping and you wake up and you have a dream and you think I need to add this in the story. So it becomes like on keep notes on my phone. Then I have to email that to myself to make sure it reaches my laptop at some point. And so my story is like in all these different mediums, but of course it all comes together on the laptop. And I guess Modesty was different. It was nonfiction, it was research, it was very structured, and I had a time limit for that. So that took maybe, I guess the whole thing took, I think I did the first draft within 9 months, I think.
Yeah. Well, you were pregnant, and so it was one of those where the book had to be out before the baby.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
Yeah.
And then right now, Dunya, so it's been 1.5 years since I started writing it, and I'm in the, I guess, the main editing, first main chunk of edits now. So
yeah, great. Shahd.
Well, I think I would agree with what everybody said, but for me, the first part is absolutely reading. So I end up reading quite a lot before even starting to write, and I read about a similar subject, or kind of look at how other authors have approached the same subject, or is there anything missing that people haven't talked about yet? How can I kind of create my own voice? What's different about what I'm trying to offer? So the reading component is a lot at the very, very beginning, and then I end up with an idea that I try to see through. And a big part of the struggle, I think, for me and for a lot of young writers, they always say this to me, is the idea of writer's block. So I think a big part of it is the discipline part, and that kind of just gets, you get better at it, just like going to the gym. You get better at it with time. The more you read and the more you write, and that's definitely the hardest part. So I try to have at least 2 hours a week where I'm just, at the laptop and, not allowing myself to go anywhere else until the work comes to me, until the words come to me. So I'll do whatever it takes for the words to come to me. I'll meditate, I'll have an iced tea, I'll do anything as long as I get the words out. So yeah, that's me.
Fantastic. So you've all had different paths into your publishing career, if you like, and certainly very different. You've all had different paths to us as a publisher. Shahd, do you want to talk about how you came to Neem Tree Press, or how you've come to other publishers, and just walk your way through the publishing journey that you've undergone?
So absolutely, the publishing journey for me was really difficult and quite disappointing. Like I'm sure many authors listening might feel the same. I was writing about disability, and I was writing about my experience with disability. And the more I pitched it to publishers in Europe, publishers in the States, I kept getting the same response, which was the book was too specific. And this is a topic that doesn't interest the average reader. And I just kept feeling like, okay, then there's nothing that I'm offering. So when I finally found Neem Tree Press, I found it through, I think it was through Twitter. Somebody had tweeted about Neem Tree Press, and I approached Neem Tree thinking that, okay, this is my last shot, and that was really my last hope. I was thinking, okay, at this point, then that's it. And so the response was great. I'm very grateful for that. And what was really helpful was that there was a value seen in a story that I was looking at as a universal kind of narrative, as a narrative that could really happen to any of us. And for me, I always say that, illness and the body, these are stories that happen to all of us, regardless of race, regardless of gender, regardless of age. And so I really thought this would be a topic that would be universal, but publishers really struggled to see the value in that narrative. There was also the dilemma of being, living abroad, but also being published by a UK publisher or a US publisher, and the fears of the book not making it, the market not being open enough. So I'm really happy that you've taken the risk to go with the book, and the book is actually now doing really great and being translated into lots of languages. And I think that kind of just reaffirms my original idea that this is a universal narrative, regardless of, a language and race and all of these other barriers.
Yeah. I mean, actually, one thing I'll say is that for all of you in this room, my criteria is if I can read a book in a night, then I know I've got the book. And for all of your books, that's exactly what happened. So it was actually a pretty easy decision for all of you. So Faiqa, what about your journey? You've had probably a bit more of a traditional journey into publishing, would you say?
I mean, honestly, I didn't have a choice because, some authors are very, hands-on. They're very savvy with social media and all these things, and they know about publishing. I know nothing about publishing. All I know is, writing. So I needed an agent. So without an agent, I wouldn't have, got anywhere. So I knew I needed an agent, and as soon as I had finished the MFA and I knew my novel was complete, I was happy with the edits, my own edits. I started pitching, and for a full year, I pitched to US and UK. And, a lot of agents said, oh, we love it, but we don't think it's right for our market. And when enough agents had said that, I realized, that they're right. This story is perhaps not going to be published in UK or US. It's entrenched in my own culture, in my own sort of geography. It's probably not going to sell. So then I started pitching to Indian agents. We don't have any agents in Pakistan, as far as I know. And I was picked up, and that's how I got my first deal. But I think I write stories which are entrenched in my own geography and my own sort of culture. All writers do, but with UK especially, I've seen that very few agents and publishers take the risk of moving out of that box. That it's the farthest they will go is diaspora writing. So like Shahd was saying this, I got lucky with Neem Tree Press, because this is the storyteller is a story which is not everybody would take up. I feel it's quite a different kind of thing. So yeah, that was my.
Well, it's a beautiful story, and I think it's a universal story. I mean, that's the thing. I think that there is this preconceived notion that they're not readers out there for these kind of stories, whatever these kind of stories are, and obviously we're betting that there are. And I think that all stories by definition, storyteller, all stories by definition are universal, and so who's to decide other than the reader what's going to appeal to them or not. So Safinah, what about you? What was your path?
Archna, I think we connected on one of these panels at the festival last year, and I remember I had started Reverie. I was doing some publishing for Pakistan. Meanwhile, I was also writing. So I think in my identity as well, I didn't know if I was a writer or a publisher at that point. But I had pitched it to some agents in India. Because again, like Faiqa said, that there's no one here, and I'm really seriously considering starting a literary agency in Pakistan as well, because there's so many writers who come to me, as a publisher, and I don't know who is vouching for them, right? So about the time when I think Neem Tree Press had said that, okay, we're coming on, a literary agency in India also said that we want to take you on. And at that point, I was like, should I go with an agency right now or a publisher? And it just made more sense for me to go directly with the publisher, because I was talking to you directly. And I felt like, the agency will take some time, obviously reaching out to publishers, and if, a bird in hand. So it just made, sense for me to go with Neem Tree Press. And you guys have been doing such excellent work. And, I realized that when a publisher is picking up stories that are not commercial or under the same sort of box that Pakistani or South Asian fiction is put into, and I think most of our stories are not about bomb blasts anymore or the expat life. We do connect on a universal human manner than anything else. And it's wonderful that I'm hearing about all these wonderful stories and books that you've picked up, and I'm very happy to be a part of the Neem Tree Press family.
Thank you. Well, I mean, I feel very strongly that, you know, there's a lot of books that are written in, obviously, broadly speaking, the English-speaking world, and certainly the US and the UK, that are considered universal stories in the rest of the world. And like, okay, hang on here. There are other stories all over the world who should be considered universal. So yeah, very, very happy. Hafsa, how did you, well, actually, perhaps I should, you know, I reached out to you. Obviously, as a journalist, you're a writer anyway, but so what happened with nonfiction with Hafsa is I was intrigued by the whole modest fashion movement. I just couldn't see how modesty and fashion went together. I knew a couple of people who were in it, and I knew that there was a lot of money going into this industry. And I met Hafsa doesn't remember, but I met her somewhere in Dubai at some dinner or something or other. And then so I knew she existed and I knew of her. So then I reached out to a mutual friend, basically chased her, and here we are. Yeah. So is that about right?
I have a project I want to talk to you about, but it's secret, and I don't. Would you be interested? But I'm in London, and I don't want to get into details on email. And I was like, actually, I'll be in London next month. So, and I remember I had that baby on board.
Yeah.
Who passed, and then you saw me and you looked at the badge, you're like, oh wait, I don't know if you're going to be down for this project, but do you want to write a book?
Yeah.
Yes, I actually really owe you and Neem Tree Press for making me an author. I never imagined I would write a book before. Writing has always been my thing. I love journalism. I love writing, you know, those 1,200 word stories, get them out in 2 days, bang, on to the next one. So that's kind of my writing lifestyle. So writing a researchful manuscript was very new for me, but I loved doing it because it was a topic I was passionate about. Like you said, I had written about modest fashion before, different, maybe probably around 20, 30 different articles about different elements of the industry. And to put it all together in a book and answer really controversial questions also that the newspaper I was writing for wouldn't have always run. And then, you know, just getting all these voices of different women together and speaking to, you know, all these interviews in person. I mean, the book took me to Istanbul, London, Dubai. I mean, it just was speaking to so many people. It was a great experience. And then, I never thought I'd write fiction after that, but
that'll be good. It'll be good. It is good. So I just wanted to also we don't have that much time, but who are your 2 or 3 favorite authors? I'm just going to run quickly through that. And if we have time, let's talk about marketing and branding yourselves as authors. We may not have time to that, but let's do. So should we start off with Shahd? Who's your favorite 2 or 3 authors, would you say, that you take inspiration from, perhaps?
So for me, it was a lot of feminist thinkers, Bell Hooks, Audre Lorde, all of these, you know, writers who are writing both as teachers, but also as writers. So, you know, and having this politics of care is clearly in all of their writings. And when it comes to kind of branding myself as an author, I'm really trying to kind of follow in these footsteps of being a teacher, activist, writer, but also connecting very much with the same kind of safe space in the book itself, but also with readers and, you know, even with people on social media. So having this safe space is very much this Black feminist thinking, and I'm kind of trying to adapt that today.
Brilliant. Safinah?
I think rather than authors, I would like to just say favorite books, because sometimes I don't like books from the same author that I've loved before. So I really, really loved The Color Purple by Alice Walker. Then Khalid Hosseini's all works, Leanne Moriarty, Mohammad Hanif's Case of Exploding Mangoes, Red Birds, not so much. But yeah, I think the favorite have to be Arundhati Roy.
Okay.
First book, not the second.
Okay, and then brand building, but we'll do that later, I guess. Faiqa?
I don't know. There are so many. I mean, I love Zadie Smith. I love Elena Ferrante. I love, I mean, Jane Austen, Charlotte Bronte. I love. I mean. I love Naima Rashid's work, who's Pakistani writer, Shandana Minhas, I love. I mean, there are so many, I could go on and on. I mean, I love Arundhati Roy, like Safinah was saying. And I love a lot, I read a lot of nonfiction as well. So, you know, bell hooks is my favorite too. Shahd was talking about her. I mean, these are Black feminist movement is really taught me a lot as well. So I read across the board. I read everything.
Okay, fantastic. Hafsa.
For me, books I'm loving right now, I guess it's also just the phase of life I'm in right now, but I'm really enjoying these Middle Eastern authors who write about their main characters are females in modernity, but kind of also trying to maintain that spiritual connection and often in non-traditional, non-orthodox ways. So in fiction, Layla Abu Layla is one of my favorites. Bird Summons was like a transformative read for me. And then a newer book, Salma Al-Wardani, she's also she's Egyptian, Pakistani, Scottish, I believe. No, sorry, Egyptian, Pakistani, Irish, something like that, from European in there. I think she works with the BBC, but she wrote a book called These Impossible Things, which came out last year or the year before. I loved it. And then in nonfiction, Amina Wadood is my all-time hero.
Fantastic. And I know in terms of brand building, we're going through, you know, and I think for all of you, I think what we tell all of our authors, for everyone, for the young people listening is, usually what you'll find is authors will start specializing in a genre. And so it's, and book sales is a little bit different from building an author brand. And so it's important when you're a young writer and you're considering, you know, a career forever and ever into writing, that you think about, you know, what your brand will be as an author. So yeah, I think time is up almost. Are there any other questions that we should have talked about? I think we've got 2 minutes. Is there anything else that anyone of you would want to say, or any advice that you want to give any young people listening?
I think I'll just add on to the branding bit. I think, you know, the stereotypical writer was always shy and never sort of promoted herself or himself. And times have changed. And I feel like, you know, whenever I post something, I'm like, is that too much? You know, you know, are my followers or are my friends thinking that, again, is she posting about her book or her event or whatever? So I think things have changed now, and one needs to be mindful that we're not doing it too much. And at the same time, the message is also across that there's something happening, so that relevant people or readers who would like to tune in or who would like to read your books are, you know, made aware of it as well. But I think there's like a thin line now with the readings and with social media. How do you sort of balance yourself being, you know, the writer was always behind the book cover. You know, I would always wonder when I was younger who these writers were. You know, there was no sort of tagging when we were younger, or we didn't really get to see, there was no Google even. So you couldn't Google them. But now I think times have changed and we've become somewhat public.
Yeah, I think there is a dichotomy, because I think, Faiqa, you hinted on it, that actually I think writing is a very personal, introspective process, and yet we're all asked to market ourselves, you know, and it is frustrating. It's almost, you know, private lives of actors, etc. Do I care? No, I just want to watch the movie. And so with books also, I sympathize with you all, actually, because I think probably what you would like the most to do is just sit there and write the occasional letter to your fans, you know, wherever they are. Yeah, so but we're very much aware of this, you know, tussle for writers who have to then go off and publicize. But of course, as publishers, we need you all to, you know, to publicize your books in order to, you know, increase our sales. Thank you all very, very much. It's been really interesting talking to you. I wish we could have done this in person, but nevertheless, it's been great discussion. Sabine, over to you.
Thank you so much, Archna, for this amazing panel. One small thing, Hafsa, we're having a session where we're featuring Layla Abu Layla tomorrow. It's a pre-recorded session. It will be we'll broadcast it at, I think, 10:30 or between 10:30 and 11. And we've got Hudan Fakhruddin, and it's basically focusing Arab women in literature. So I think great. Thank you so much, everyone. Archna, Hafsa, Shahd, Faiqa, Safinah, for this amazing, enlightening discussion. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you so
Thank you
much.
very
Bye-bye.
much.